Hey, this is Derek Slater. I'm a policy manager here at Google, and welcome back to another edition of Google Developers Live. This time we're talking about the ITU. This week, starting in Dubai, governments from around the world have gathered to talk at the International Telecommunication Union about the future of the internet. A number of important issues are on the table, and with governments gathering in Dubai, we wanted to have a global dialogue of our own here about this issue with some of the leaders from around the world in civil society and internet freedom groups to speak about this. You can learn about what Google's been saying on this issue at google.com/takeaction. But today we're going to turn it over to these range of leaders from around the world to hear from them and what they're doing, what they think, and what's the next step in internet freedom around the world after this conference. We'll start with just a range of introductions so you can get to know the panel. Carolina, let's start with you. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, well, I am Carolina Botero. I am a lawyer in Bogota, Colombia, and I am directing a group that's called Internet Law and Society. And we have been active the last few years, like 3 years, on the issues of digital rights. We are very interested on the IE2. In fact, we managed to get ourselves in the delegation to go and see how Latin American countries were doing, but at the end couldn't travel. Anyway, we're doing it on the distance, from the distance. And my colleague is Pilar.
Hello, I'm Pilar Sainz. I work with Carolina in the Charisma Foundation. And as she said, we are trying to involve ourselves in the I2 meeting, but we can't travel. But we think that it's a huge meeting, and we need to be more monitoring a lot of this meeting.
Thanks, guys. Claudio, why don't you introduce yourself and your organization?
Can you hear me, right?
Yes.
Well, I'm Claudio Ruiz, and I'm director of a Chilean organization called Derechos Digitales, like digital rights in Spanish. And Derechos Digitales is a non-profit organization based in Santiago who fights for human rights on the digital environment. And the kind of thing that we're working on the last years, I would say, it's related to copyright from one side, privacy for the other, and freedom of speech on the internet. So we're very, very involved in all this ITU process in the way that can, in some way, be involved or change the way of the internet as a platform for developing human rights.
Great. Marilia, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Hi, my name is Marilia Maciel. I am a researcher at the Center for Technology and Society in FGV in Brazil. The center is mainly devoted to research on intellectual property. We follow discussions in the World Intellectual Property Organization, and we also develop research on internet governance. I have been involved in research in internet governance for 7 years now, following different topics, basically and mostly in the UN. I have been a civil society representative in the Commission for Science and Technology for Development, and on the working group that has discussed IGF improvements as well. And we are following the ITU debates. We have a researcher from our center that has managed to join the Brazilian delegation, so we have information that she's passing to us, and it's been quite interesting indeed.
Okay, well, we look forward to hearing about that. Mawaki, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, hello, I'm Mawaki Chango. So I have worked since the late 90s in the areas of information and communication technologies, which we refer to as ICT in general, policy and developments, notably at UNESCO and with the International Development Research Center. Actually, during the WOSIS process, I was a civil society, an African civil society participant. And later on, just before the second phase of the summit, I was a joint United Nations and Diplo Foundation fellow at the Secretariat of the Working Group on Internet Governance in Geneva. Currently, actually, I have also served as counselor in with ICANN's generic name supporting organization for generic top-level domain names policies. And recently, I have just completed actually a PhD at Syracuse University, and my research focus is identity and authentication from digital identity all the way back to medieval seals. So currently, I'm a project coordinator for APC in charge of internet policy in Africa. So as to APC, my organization, which is the Association for Progressive Communications, it is a global network of civil society organizations across the world, and it focuses particularly on ICTs and particularly on the internet access, affordable access for everybody across the globe, and ICT availability in general. And as such, APC advocates for internet inclusive policy making processes so that everybody, what we call nowadays multi-stakeholder, can have a say in the policy development processes regarding ICT.
Thanks, Milwaukee. So Yochai, we'll let you introduce yourself as well, and then let me start with a question for you, and then we can open it up for discussion across the group. And it's great to have you all from around the world. Yochai, why don't you introduce yourself and then tell us a little bit about what is going on at the ITU this week? Can you give an overview for the viewers? Where did this come from? What's the history of it? And try and make sense of this alphabet soup of internet policy acronyms that we're talking about today.
Sure. So I'm Yochai Ben-Avi. I'm the policy director at accessnet.org. We're an international organization that defends and extends the digital rights of users at risk around the world. And so we combine sort of a global movement of users in, I think, almost every country, if not every country in the world, who are signing petitions, going to protest, mobilizing around these issues, including extensively around the WICET, which we'll define in a minute, the World Conference on International Telecommunications. And then we have a policy shop that I direct that does, practical policy recommendations to governments, corporations, and civil society. And then a tech arm that's providing near real-time, 24/7 support to activists on the ground and building new technologies to support them. We've been pretty deeply engaged in the WICET and the ITU for some time now, and one of our policy analysts is over there as well. So let's first go through this alphabet soup. What is the ITU? Is the International Telecommunication Union. It's a UN agency, and right now they're hosting the WICET. Basically, this is an opaque government-controlled event, and the goal is really to update a decades-old international treaty that's called the ITRs, the International Telecommunication Regulations. So there are sort of 3 points to think about here in terms of framing the debate and getting some background here. Ultimately, this is the debate that this treaty does need to be updated. It is really out of date. It was last touched in 1988. And ultimately, the biggest debate that's going on here is, or rather in Dubai, I should say, is whether this binding international treaty and the ITU's corresponding mandate should be expanded to internet and internet policy. This would represent a really big shift away from the open, multi-stakeholder institutions that currently do internet policymaking. Another sort of round of alphabet soup, we have ICANN, the International Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, the IEEE, and a variety of others. And the thing that really differentiates them is, from the ITU, is that the ITU, only governments have a vote. In order to join the ITU, the Secretary General likes to make a big point that they have 700 sector members, but those 700 sector members have paid anywhere between $2,000 and $35,000 to be there, and they still can't speak on the floor. And this stands in sharp contrast to what we're doing here. In terms of the sort of second point to know about this process, what's been like. The preparatory process has been deeply flawed. The ITU, like the ITU, it lacks transparency. Throughout the preparatory process, the only way we've been able to get documents has been largely through leaks. And it really lacks inclusivity. Users have not had a voice. Civil society, by and large, hasn't had a voice. And so I think the third thing to consider is that the ITU does good work. It does a lot of really good work, and we have to remember that this is not just about the Secretariat. This is really about member states using the Wicked to play out their larger geopolitical agendas. And so the authoritarian states that are trying to close down the internet to curtail freedoms online are pushing proposals that do that. You have other blocks of countries that have really benefited from the development work that ITU does. And so, there's less of a need to sort of expand or less concern with expanding the ITU's mandate in this way. And then I think there's also sort of a community of folks who are pushing pushing back against the outsized U.S. influence in internet policymaking. I think it's important to acknowledge this as a really serious and legitimate concern. And so I think that we constantly sort of have heard this along the way, that developing country voices need to be heard more, and their agenda advanced, and so that's why they're turning to the Wiki. And I guess my question is sort of like I'll start with Marilia, because I think she has some insight into this process given her colleague on the ground. Do you really feel that the sort of Brazilian agenda, or sort of the developing emerging world agenda, is actually being advanced during the Wiki conversations?
Well, as a matter of fact, I'd like to begin saying that I very much agree with what you have said. I think that the ITU has a very important role, and the awareness that has been raised among civil society about ITU because of Wiki, I hope it will be continued after Wiki finishes, that civil society becomes more sustainably involved in ITU's work. And I say this because I think it's important to notice that on the one hand, we have this group of states that have made severely negative proposals that will impact negatively on freedom of information, expression, and innovation. But on the other hand, we also have these groups of states that are trying to make us believe that UN has no role in internet governance. And I don't think this is accurate. There is a lot of things that not only ITU, but other UN bodies should be dealing with. And maybe they are not yet taking these issues into account. And maybe they are not taking them as we like them to take them, in a multi-stakeholder fashion. But there are a lot of important issues that UN should be dealing with, such as security and making security not impact negatively on freedom of information and expression, and jurisdiction issues, which is very important. We all know the cases of domain name seizure that have taken place, such as Hoja Directa in Spain. This is something very serious. Now, national jurisdictions impact on other jurisdictions, and this is something that we need to look into. And I think that Wiki presents us with a very good opportunity not only to know more about ITU and UN's work, but also to take a look of our national regulatory frameworks. Probably many people know that here in Brazil we are in a very important moment. We have a regulation that has been developed in a collaborative way online. All the people that use the internet have been able to make comments to this regulation. And after this collaborative process that lasted for 3 months, this regulation has been sent to Congress. And now it's being under revision. And because ITU happened at the same time that this law arrived in Congress, Wiki had a negative impact on the discussion of this bill, because this bill tries to enable network neutrality, which would be fundamental to the guarantee of innovation in Brazil. So because the discussion is taking place in Wiki right now, the discussions in Congress have been stalled because our government doesn't have a position on network neutrality, and they wanted to go to Wiki and hear from other countries what are their perspectives, hear from Ethno what is their perspective. So I think that in developing countries that do not have this regulatory framework in place, as developed countries already have, this may have a negative impact, but it also creates an opportunity for us to be aware of how there is an interplay between international regulation and national regulation as well.
Claudio, I want to turn to you on that point, because is that a comparable experience to what you've had with your organization, or what are the key differences with sort of what Marilia has been discussing?
Well, I think what Marilia has pointed out, it's pretty important, and it's the key discussion in all this thing, especially because despite of the fact that the Wicked discussion has been closed doors, and we don't have a very clear idea about what the kind of thing that they're discussing, the documents they're sharing, and that kind of stuff. I will say all the discussion has been framed in some way as take hands off the internet from one side, and from the other side, this idea of this government, or this government-centered kind of agenda trying to, take over the internet. And I will say it's not it's not either one idea what is happening, and neither is the other. I will say it's all the discussion on Wicked and all the discussion about what we are talking about. It's just about the power, and it's just about controlling things, and it's more about a control structure in some way. So my point here, and the experience that we have here in Chile, I will say, it's just to try to use this opportunity and to use this momentum, this discussion momentum worldwide in a national agenda. And one of the things that at least here in Chile we have faced, it's despite of the fact that our government have this a digital agenda and a digital plan, and for the next 10 years. And we don't have a very clear idea about what is the Chilean position on Wicked, and why our government is not opening up the doors to other civil society organizations or different multi-stakeholders and groups to just share opinions and actually adding some different points to the Chilean position. So I think it's pretty important what Marilia said about how this Wicked discussion worldwide can be useful on the national level or even the regional level to just empower different stakeholders structures to taking decisions and using multi-stakeholders and groups to just to discuss the internet in general, not just in a technical way or not just in a political way, but talking about the internet as a platform to developing human rights. And when we're talking about human rights, we need to address all the perspectives which are involved in those things, and not just the government point of view or not just the company's agenda. So I think these things, it will be very interesting, and I'm pretty concerned about the way all the discussion will be framed in the future, and taking into account the importance of this discussion, and taking especially into account all the media attendance that it's now in Dubai, and especially in these human rights groups around the world. So I think that will be very, very important.
Right. And Milwaukee, one of the things that both Marilia and Claudio spoke to is sort of, this is an important moment, not just what happens at the Wicked today, but as a moment of growing the community of people who are thinking about these issues. You give a bit of perspective. APC has been involved in these issues for quite some time, on sort of what is the history of this community discussion like, and where do you see it, where do you hope it goes now coming out of the ITU and the discussion we're having today and this month? Okay, thanks.
The discussion about internet governance has been around for at least since the 90s, at the inception of ICANN. People have been more or less aware of it. I have to admit that not many people were involved in the process at that time, especially on the side of African civil society. And WSIS was a tremendous opportunity for engagement around the world, particularly in Africa. People have become aware of internet governance issues and challenges more acutely since WSIS, since the preparatory process in 2003. And APC has been, of course, advocating around those issues since then. In general, even before the particular issue area of internet governance, APC has always been advocating for more affordable access to ICTs and inclusive policymaking processes. So with the versus the internet governance issues came to the fore. Now, as we progress since 2003, since the versus, the ranks of civil society folks being involved in Africa have been growing. The main challenge always being capacity building and funding to participate in meetings around the world. With regard to the work itself, we have started preparing ICT civil society participants around the continent through a discussion list and a wiki page in order to for them to become more aware of the issues and the stake, and try to petition their respective governments in order to be informed about their government positions and the preparatory process that their governments engage in, so that, if possible, they can even be part of the national delegation. I'm happy to report that some of our colleagues managed to get on board with their government delegation, like in Kenya, probably also in Uganda. We have been hearing different updates, if you will, from the grounds, and possibly also Cote d'Ivoire. Anyway, as Africa Internet Policy Coordinator, I'm not focusing particularly on individual countries, and I am in a position of being kind of an observatory of how different governments, different countries in the continent are progressing on the issue of being more inclusive, being more multi-stakeholder in their policy-making processes, and there have been some little progress in that regard. Now, coming back to the WORKIT's agenda itself, I believe, as a couple of my colleagues said, it's really about power struggle and about control. Control can be political. It can be, under the guise of cyber security. It can be about controlling people and their freedom of expression and constraining those rights. It can also be about commerce and financial reasons. What is happening here is that at the core of the issues is the fact that the government, since the last treaty, the 1988 treaty, we have seen a lot of things change in the sorry, I have my...
We lost the lights there. Well, let me just... Yeah. There we go, and he's back.
The light is back.
Mwaki, let me pause you there, because actually I want to ask Carolina a similar thing, because I know, Carolina, you've been spending a lot of time this year building up capacity in your region and working on new projects to try and bring more people into the fold of working on internet policy, understanding it. What do you think, what are the big challenges that you see sort of ahead and trying to get people to understand why things like these sort of treaty conferences matter, and what can people be doing in their communities? What do you think is effective for people to be doing to try and raise awareness about these issues?
Well, what I think the main problem is I would like to connect it with what Marilia was trying to explain, and it is that in our region, except probably for Brazil and some other, I don't know, Mexico, maybe Chile, Argentina, have some kind of role in in these issues. The rest of us are really behind into it. For instance, we can see we have been trying to follow up positions in our countries on in Wicked Meeting in Dubai. And what we found is that the region has meant to be joined the CTEL position, which is an inter-American organization of telecommunications for the governments. And but the point is, there are 39 statements on this declaration, and really each country has joined only some of them. For instance, Colombia just joined 2 of those propositions of the CITEL. So really saying that all the countries are together in the region with a position in Dubai is not really true. The truth is that they have discussed it a little bit, and each country has chosen what to say. But when you ask them from our countries, especially little countries like ours, they don't really know, and they don't explain it. For instance, we heard from Ecuador that they had tried to contact their ministry and try to find out what the position is, how are they going, and the response from the functionaries, from the public servants was always, we're doing all the CITEL recommendations, and that is really not true. So even the public servants that are engaged into these issues, especially in small countries, are really little aware of what's going on. This was one of the reasons why we wanted to participate directly in the delegation in Dubai, because we found out that in the region only Brazil is attending a civil society. The rest of the countries are not having any representative from the civil society, which also means that you have the gap of language, because we many countries, and having the information in our language help to bridge the situation. We really find that there is a lack of information and a lack of resources in our language. Derechos Digitales is actually doing a good job translating and putting some resources on, but it would be great to have people, Spanish-speaking, reporting from Dubai, telling us what the different representations, delegations from our countries are saying, because our feeling is that especially small countries that have very little delegations, on the other hand, just 1 or 2, they are not necessarily clear on their position, and it would be very good to follow them and give them more information from civil society perspective. This is more or less also what we found as an experience during the last 2 years of lobby in the Congress regarding precisely norms or draft laws that were put forward into the Congress especially to control content on the internet. I will say that, of course, as Claudio said, that control and power on the internet are both issues to be aware of in these kind of regulations. I don't know if you would like to add something?
Well, I think that the other important issue is say that, for example, CITEL documents are open, but we didn't know them. And I think that we need more people doing monitoring the other meetings in the region. And the meetings that maybe there are more information for our countries in there. What is this position of these countries? And when you see the site, the website, you just don't see enough information in other language. They have a Spanish page, for example, but I think that not all the information is in other language. So it's important to try to have more information in other language for everyone.
Follow up, yeah, just to follow up.
Derek, can I jump in here?
Yeah, go ahead, Yochai.
So I just want to sort of comment. I mean, I think Carolina and Pilar raised a really important point about the need for sort of in-language access to documents. But I want to sort of comment a little bit about sort of the notion of we don't really know what's going on here. I mean, I think we saw on day one, and it was only on the first day of the conference did we find out whether civil society that was not on a government delegation was going to get in at all. That vote did go well. You know, they did allow civil society to be, you know, at the conference venue, to attend the plenary sessions and the committee 5 sessions. That's sort of where the bulk of the treaty writing is getting done. But what we've already seen in just 4 days of conference, and only actually less than that in terms of real substantive debate, is, you know, that as there's massive, you know, divides. It's very contentious, and the chair of the Wicket is pushing a lot of these issues into what are called working groups. Now, this is not a working group like you and I think. You know, it's a couple people trying to hammer it out. It's still all 193, you know, member states, but civil society is not allowed to participate in the working groups. Unlike the plenary sessions and the full committee sessions, they're not live streamed, and so it's really hard to get information out. And, you know, we can get, those of us who have colleagues who are on government delegations have some means, but then we can't share that information. So again, I think you saw sort of a move, you know, for the ITU and its member states on the first day, that to make a decision, you know, behind closed doors to give a modicum of transparency. And this is really concerning given the really dangerous proposals that we're seeing. You know, a lot of, you know, I think everyone sort of has touched upon human rights in some way. But right now there's a huge debate, you know, about whether to include human rights at all in the treaty, particularly, and that's really concerning when that's juxtaposed with, you know, proposals like on spam, right, which would say that governments can block any content that has no meaningful message. Well, that's a really dangerously subjective term in the hands of, you know, a government. And then when you add that with the obligation to take affirmative steps, you know, take measures to appropriate measures is the language used, you know, to curtail spam. If you look at the right to know, you know, that would allow governments to know how their traffic is routed. You know, first of all, that would require a fundamental overhaul of the internet's architecture, trying to shift it more to how traditional telecommunications work. But it would also open the door to widespread pervasive surveillance. And then you have other proposals, particularly from Russia, and I'll stop after this just to give you, I just want to sort of contextualize this in terms of what the debates are, because human rights is not the discourse here. I mean, the Russia proposal, you know, would allow censoring content that, you know, threatens national unity and security and is of a sensitive nature, you know, these very ambiguous, vague terms. And so we're seeing, you know, a really contentious debate that's happening actually still largely outside the public eye.
And I want to make sure that as we come up almost to the end of our time that we take a little bit of time for questions from people who are watching. Well, one question that really is focused on, you know, obviously internet freedom and human rights are critical, but obviously the internet can also be used for some for illegal activities, for some forms of harm. If this isn't the right forum, what are the right ways to be addressing this, or how do you see that conversation going forward? How do we balance those things?
Are you looking for me to answer that, or someone else?
I'll leave it to the panel, but if Yochai, you want to jump in, that's fine. Or Milwaukee, you can as well.
Okay.
Before you answer, I would like to just make a point on what Yochai just said.
Sure.
What the question Derek made or did to us was how to get people involved. And what I was trying to explain is that probably in countries like ours, we're like step 3 behind.
Yeah.
In order to explain to people the importance of the meeting, you first need information in the language.
Yep.
And that was my point. Of course, if you what Yochai said, it's really important. But then you are like in step 6+. You know, instead of that, the point is you have all these countries that are there and maybe voting, and they are step 3 minus. Just because they don't even, I mean, and not just the governments, which I already said, the public servants don't know, and the civil society don't even care. So we have to first make that as an issue to be able then to ask to be there, let's say. I don't know. I just wanted to make that point.
No, it's a great point, Carolina. Milwaukee, you were going to jump in as well. Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to say a couple of things about the question that you just asked. We need to come back to the idea, to the core issue of this ITR debate. The first question, I believe, it has been a question of definition, and it is about knowing whether internet-related issues or governance can be part of the ITR. And so the definition debate has been about, I think the US, people are familiar to that debate in the US. That has been a long-running debate, whether internet is part of basic telecommunications or is what you call here enhanced service, right? And whether the telecom regulatory framework applied to the internet. So once you understand that, and you understand that the telecom regulatory framework cannot apply to the internet because of all the content issues, for example, that you mentioned, Yukai. So then the human right issue does not even become a problem, because first of all, ITU is part of the UN, and there's a clear universal human rights regime at the UN organization level across the system. So those proposals going against freedom of expression and all that have to be opposed upfront on the basis of the human rights regime that is accepted and is supposed to be enforced at the level of the UN. So at APC, we don't think we need really to include a human rights issue within the ITR. Those are issues to be debated, but not within the ITR, because the ITRs must be about basic telecommunication regulatory framework. So as to the question where or how to approach those issues related to internet, we have had the Internet Governance Forum. The problem is, which is multi-stakeholder, everybody is welcome, civil society, government, and businesses, etc., academics, everybody. But the problem is, how do we go from collecting and integrating people's inputs and view into something that is actionable? That's what the IGF Internet Governance Forum has not been able to do so far. And so if we can go back to a formula like IGF, but evolve from the simple talk shop to implementation to recommendation, that would be a good way to go about it.
Great. Well, thanks everyone. We're just out of time. I know we haven't been able to hear from everyone multiple times, but it was great to hear from all of you experts from around the world on this important subject. And at Milwaukee, as you were saying, this issue of how do we protect the free and open internet, how do we protect freedom online, certainly something that's a conversation that isn't ending here, it isn't even beginning. It's something that hopefully will continue to expand around the world to be as inclusive and participatory as possible. So we thank all of you for joining us, and for all of you for watching. Again, thanks for joining Google Developers Live, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.